What if I said you can score an entire cinematic track with just one plugin? The team over at UJam asked if I wanted to try out their new plugin Cinedream ahead of the release date, and of course I said yes. I was already a big fan of their other plugins like USynth and the Virtual Guitarist series. Some of my favorites in the Virtual Guitarist collection include Amber and Carbon. They sound super realistic and they're really easy to work with. So to put it to the test, I composed a short trailer style track using only Cinedream and a little bit of percussion just for support. Whether you're composing trailers, documentaries, or video games, this might be one of the quickest ways to get that wide cinematic sound. All right, so let's dive in and just kind of take a listen to the track that I wrote. It is just kind of a three-part short trailer structure style piece. So essentially all your purple tracks are going to be your Cinedream, and then we've just got some percussion up top just for a little bit of support, just to kind of move the piece forward. So let's check it out. So in regards to all the sounds I use in this track and what presets I used and started with, of course, I went through and spent a lot of time learning the plugin, but this is the kind of general presets that a lot of them came from. So first one is our Homage to Hammock. The other one was our Monster Wall. So that one's pretty nasty, but you can do a lot with it. This was another one that I liked quite a bit in there. Rock Punisher is something that we used, and I think I completely changed the preset that it started from. Because I don't think I really used it on open chords either, but you can get some pretty cool stuff with that also. Suspense Driver was another one that we used in the piece. Again, the quality of the effects is really good. That ping pong delay, that eighth note delay is just awesome. I also really like this one, The Village. And this is the original Homage track. I could see this being really useful in things like you're doing documentaries, things that just kind of need that underscore, but need something interesting going on, and you don't want to have to sit there and, you know, record 5 different tracks of guitar with different effects and spend the time sound designing that and programming everything. This is kind of it's done. So let's go through something like one of our more ambient, like the homage preset or something like that, and just kind of break down the sections of the plugin and what that looks like. So first of all, you've got kind of your top part, which is going to be kind of really broken down, in my opinion, into 3 sections. You've got the attack and kind of softer and longer variants on that, and how much you want of an attack there. And then you also have an optional tuning option if you want to detune it at all. There's a variance on how hard, what the variation looks like in the character. So depending on how hard you want to pluck the instrument, you've got that here. And then softer and longer, you can kind of play with the contour of the attack. Here we've got a stomp box section that we can kind of go through, and it's just like it sounds like. Think of any kind of pedal board that you've ever had in front of you for a guitar player. That's what this section's going to have, and it's going to have just a ton of stuff that you can go through and add, and then also kind of blend in so you can choose how much you want. So for right now, we're going to turn that off. And then you've got this section here, which they call the finisher section. So I kind of consider this middle part really your effects section. Finisher kind of breaks into 2 parts. You've got your effects section, so an additional set of effects, or one of the more kind of, I feel like, useful parts is going to be really your ambience. These can go for a really long period of time depending on the amount that you set of each one. So you might want to kind of dial that back just depending on what ambience you're choosing. We're going to turn that off for now. You've also got this width section, kind of going over, how wide do you want the image? Do you want it more narrow right down the center? Or do you want it to kind of sound more like a stereo image? And then how much focus, like how in your face is that particular performance of the guitar? It does throw it kind of back in that stereo space really well. It does a nice job of blending it in the background where you're not having to play with that in the mix. So I do love that aspect of it. And then here we've got our different styles of amp. So from the tamest type of amp all the way up to kind of your most aggressive fuzz metal type of amp that you would have, and then the amount of drive. So that's going to be really how we set the tone of the instrument. And then down here we're going to have our playable section, style phrases, and then here you're going to have different common phrases that you would have. So that can get a little confusing, but we'll kind of go over that in detail. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to set it on a particular style preset. I'm going to set it to glow, and we're going to turn the drive down. So everything else is really off here and kind of set in the middle. So let's hear what that sounds like. So right now we're just kind of getting the sound of what just sounds like an arpeggiated guitar. And this is a really good way I've found that when you're trying to figure out what style phrase, common phrase or style phrase preset you want to go through, or that you want to program with MIDI data, because, key switches is a really big part of this, setting the key switch in your DAW and in the piano roll to dictate how the player changes is going to be a big part of it. So one thing that I thought was kind of cool was setting all of this stuff to kind of just 12 o'clock, turning it down or off with our effects, and then going through setting the style phrases and programming that, and then from there going back up on the top and coloring it after the fact. So you'll kind of see what I'm talking about here if I go. All right, so that's our style phrases. Now let's see what happens if we kind of start going through our common phrases. So similar thing. We've got a lot of muting going on up here on the top end. So with your sharp or flat keys, your black keys, you're looking at a lot of your muting. And as you hover over each one, it's going to kind of tell you what we're looking at. So muted eighth note, muted quarter note, half muted, and then you can choose between chord or note mode. So if I go out of chord mode into note mode, I'm looking at more single chord notes or more single notes. Now, within your style phrases, you also have different types of styles. What I've found is that playing between the two different style phrases and different styles of playing common phrases is a really nice way to get some variation on the guitar. And then our contour will go softer. With a lot of these, when you end up adding the effects on, you almost end up getting almost kind of like a reverse effect, which I really, really like that, actually going softer with the long ambience. And then before we play around with any of the finishers of the width, I do want to kind of check out the different amp styles. So glow is kind of just your warm, almost kind of clean, almost sounds like a Fender amp. Just kind of keep the drive set to right here. It's our more retro amp here. Voltage, I don't know if that's supposed to be like a Marshall or something like that. And then you've got Eclipse. And of course, with any of these, we can drive up the gain quite a bit. So if you've ever just wanted something really wide in the stereo image, just some like even simple guitar, this is perfect for that. So. One other thing I did want to look at was the instrument style of playing. So we know that in the player style, we've got our different styles of common phrases, style phrases. We can choose our key, open chords, things like that. We can choose between chord and note mode. But there is an instrument style of playing, which is a little bit different. I had to get used to this one. So essentially, like if I go over here and play a C major chord, over here in the left hand, this is where I could actually arpeggiate through the chord. So for example, the black keys, the sharp and flat keys, you can do your muting, kind of half muted, and then fully open. Pick scrape. There, you've just got your kind of dead note. So I think for most people it'd be a little weird. I know it is for me to kind of like play through this where the right and left hand are doing something opposite of what you're used to. So I would probably say with this part, this is something that I would program through and not try and just play it unless you got really good with it and really got used to it. So one thing to keep in mind too is that you also have a micro timing for kind of realistic feel. So if you wanted to kind of push or pull on the beat a little bit, or maybe how much you want a phrase to swing. And then they also have a humanize feature here, and then player sync to 16th, 8th notes, quarter notes, things like that. So that is kind of nice. So if you really need to adjust the timing and feel of it, make it a little bit more human, that's going to be under the micro timing part. Under the keyboard section, this is really useful to have up while you're doing a performance, because it basically gives you a map of the keyboard and what the key switching looks like. So all your key switching, your pick slides up and downs, and then your silence as well, and then kind of goes over an overview of the chord mode as well. So I use this quite a bit when I was kind of learning the plugin and trying to program in certain phrases. When you're doing a lot of the MIDI programming, this comes in really helpful. I want to start by thanking UJam for giving me early access to Cinedream. It's always nice to explore something new from a team that consistently puts out high quality products for producers and composers alike. What really stands out for Cinedream and all the UJam plugins is the attention to detail. And you can basically do everything you really need in the plugin without having to do a lot of external stuff in the mix. Whether you're scoring for trailers, film, video games, post-production, or you just want to add some cinematic ambience into a track, this plugin gets you there fast. Cinedream officially drops on their website on April 16th, and I highly recommend checking it out if any kind of cinematic sound design is remotely in your workflow. Once again, thanks for watching. Be sure to give a like, hit subscribe, and if you want to see more hands-on tutorials like this in the future, be sure to leave a comment and let me know what you think. See you next time.